gentlemen, we can now start with our next session on technology, innovations, and the environment. We have a number of virtual speakers for this occasion, and the first is going to be Sylvie Lembe, who is a teaching and research assistant in international relations at the University of Brazzaville, Congo, and the University of Lyon, Troyes in France. And the title of the presentation is Which Future for Small States of the Sahel in a Digitalized World? Sylvie, you have the virtual floor. 10 minutes, may I remind you, ladies and gentlemen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the floor. Well, before I begin with my presentation, I think I would say something on me, just to let you know that I am Sylvie Lembe. I am from Congo-Brazzaville. Congo-Brazzaville is a small country in Central Africa, as you may know it. Unfortunately, we don't speak English at all. That's why my own English is not very good. It sounds quite bad, and I apologize. However, I am very happy to participate virtually in this conference. And once again, I would like to thank Ruben and the scientific committee for accepting my paper proposal, I think 2 years ago. Thank you very much. Well, as you said, my paper is entitled Which Future for Small States of the Sahel in a Digitalized World? My idea and my intention are not to be pessimistic about the prospect of the small states of the Sahel, but just to try to assess the impact of the use of modern technology tools by young of two African countries that have been observing and analyzing for almost 10 years, and which are Cameroon and Mali. My research is a contribution to the general debate on the future of the African small states in an area where internet, smartphone, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp are increasingly becoming powerful in Africa. Contrary to what is generally said, Africa is not away from the general tendency that we observe today in technology domain. We can note that social network, internet, and modern technology tools are well used by youth of Africa, and one of the main examples to study this situation is Mali and Cameroon. And the main hypothesis of my work, my research, is to show that both Mali and Cameroon, which are two former French colonies in Africa, have been facing the impact of the subversive use of modern technology by what we qualified as illegitimated internal actors. But before I go deep in my analysis, let me share with you a PowerPoint of the Sahel region so you can have a geographical view of this region. Though I will pay much attention on Cameroon and Mali. I think it is important for you to take a look at the Sahel region. Sorry, I should begin with the first map. In this map, we can see the Sahel region. It's the region colored in orange, and as you can see, it is a combination of northern Africa, western, a bit central, and also southern Africa. Well, I think in this map it is not well precise, but in this map you can see that the Sahel region includes almost 10 countries, among which we have Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Chad, Sudan, and some geographic analysis also include Sudan and Ethiopia. However, in this map, we can see that Cameroon is not included in the Sahel region. However, since it has it's a neighboring country with Nigeria, Chad, and Niger, it is generally accepted that Cameroon is also part of the Sahel region. Why did I choose to pay attention to the subject of Mali and Cameroon in a digitalized world? Because both countries have been facing transnational movement, social protestation, and my general hypothesis is that this general movement, this social movement, internal movement, are backed due to the fact that youth in Cameroon and youth in Mali master seriously the modern tool of communication. The example are those of internet, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. Nowadays, if you happen to go to Cameroon or in Mali, you will see that most of people are connected to those tools of communication. And it is not a surprise because today it is not very expensive to have everyone can get a phone mobile, a cell mobile, but what we underline here is the fact that most of those people who, for time ago, they could not protest, they could not challenge the government, they see the opportunity with these tools of communication, this tool of high technology, which is not always controlled by local government and which are well organized and well controlled by the youth. And when I talk of youth, I also include people in Africa who don't have any job. They are unemployed. They have been facing poverty, employment, and they tend to pay attention and to make allegiance to modern actors. I think about terror actors, because those young people don't have anything to do, and poverty, unemployment are very difficult to them, and they unfortunately get some connection with those foreign but also internal actors. And the second reason why I pay attention to Mali and Cameroon cases is due to the fact that many years ago, for decades ago, both Cameroon and Mali were regarded as stable countries, but those two countries have been facing internal rebellions, internal social protestation. In this map, we can see the example of Mali, where you have many rebellions and students movements especially in the northern part. You may know that since 2002, Mali has been facing a social and political situation which is not very positive. Similarly, in Cameroon, we have observed the same situation, where in the northern part, the Anglophone, the part of the Cameroon which is under Anglophone culture, what we call Anglophone southern region, they have been protesting, and we observe the emergence of a movement called Ambazonia. Because what they are claiming is their autonomy, their liberty, freedom. This part of Cameroon, included this western of Cameroon, they perceive themselves as marginalized. And what they used to say is that the central government based in the capital city, Yaoundé, does not take into account their needs. And for almost 10 years they have been fighting, and today, unfortunately, in Cameroon, there is a situation of struggle, there is a situation of instability, especially in this western part of the country. And what we should say is that if this social protestation is growing and winning in Cameroon, is due to the fact that Cameroonians who live abroad, especially in the United States of America, in the UK, they have been backing this local movement, and they have been fighting for independence. And this situation is very complicated because the government, the main government based in Yaoundé, is not ready to listen to them. And unfortunately, the situation is getting worse. And because of the back, which is shown by Cameroonians who live abroad, the fact that they master internet thanks to internet and all the modern tools of communication. This part of Cameroonians who live abroad, they backed a lot the local movement. What we can also say is that the modern tools of communication are very significant in the importance of this movement. So the digitalized world is not an abstract. It's a reality in those two countries, because thanks to this means, people who yesterday did not have any way of expressing, any way of challenging the government, they have been challenging the central government, and thanks to the mastery of these digital tools like internet, Facebook, they are able today to tackle and to face the central government. So in a way, we can say that the future of small cities of the Sahel in a digitalized world is a bit compromised because of the fact that yesterday many youth who could not challenge, could not express themselves, have been mastering for almost 10 years the tool of communication, and this is a real problem, because not only poverty remains one of the main trouble in those countries, and if we add also the mastery by these forces, well, I am not opposed to the fact that they get mastery or they get control to the new tool of communication. The fact is that they use it to protest, they use it to program social movement. Unfortunately, innocent people are still dying because of the way they are behaving. So,
Ms. Lembe, excuse me, could you please wrap up your presentation?
Thank you, and sorry for my English, which is not very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Lembe. Next, We have the presentation by Noel Foster, a postdoctoral fellow in technology and international security at the UC Institute on Global Conflict and Cooperation in Washington, D.C. The title of the presentation is Polarization for Paralysis: How Foreign Information Campaigns Shift Foreign Political Behaviors in the Baltic States. Noel, the virtual floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us stick to the time limit of 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
We can see you, but no presentation.
I see. Can you see my slides now that they're moving?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today. This morning for me in the United States, I'm going to present some work with a colleague at Princeton's Novia Chan, titled, as you know, Polarization Process: How Authoritarian Regimes Weaponize Information and Shift Foreign Political Behaviors. So if we're at this panel today, it's surely because we've followed in the literature, but also in the news, the use by states of information technologies to influence political opinions in foreign countries. Whether the question of Russian influence operations or Chinese influence operations in Taiwan. The question I have today is, how do these states leverage new technologies exactly to disrupt their adversaries' domestic politics? I am going to argue today that these revisionist states' information operations consist mostly of factual content, not fake news, because of the technological limitations and certain reputational concerns that I'll go over. Second, the goal of these information operations is to polarize and therefore paralyze using strategic narratives. And these are enabled by the digital technologies that Sylvie Lembe went over just now. Third, factual content, not fake news, can polarize through a combination of confirmation bias and reactance. So we hear a lot about fake news, with this emphasis on using fake news to shape public opinions, generally in one's favor, through the idea of a fire-herded falsehood, using lots of fake content. But in over 100 elite interviews over the past few years, I have found otherwise. And this echoes the literature coming out of American politics and the use of social media in the United States that suggests that fake news represents only a small minority of content used to target audiences in the United States. So in the US, 1% of individuals consume 80% of fake news, and of 80% of the fake news that is shared, only 0.1% of the individuals are doing the sharing. Moreover, we know that there are significant differences in the demographics as well as the political preferences of those groups, both consuming and sharing fake news online. Moreover, there are certain technological limitations and economic limitations in spreading fake news. Fake news requires sophisticated micro-targeting, because users online who receive fake news or inappropriate content can flag it, which then leads to account suspension. Moreover, this micro-targeting technology is not available outside of a certain number of markets, English-speaking markets, generally for larger, wealthier, advanced democracies. Why? Because training these micro-targeting algorithms is a major investment, and small states with distinctive languages or larger states, conceivably, that have low-income markets, lead to low advertiser demand and therefore low return on investment. And these for-profit corporations are looking to maximize their advertising revenue. Moreover, there are reputational concerns in spreading fake news. So Russia, China, and Iran invest scarce resources in their media empires that are aimed at foreign audiences. You might recall that at the same time as pensions were modified in Russia, 1.4 billion US dollars was allocated to Russia Сегодня. Moreover, having a credible media outlet aimed at foreign audiences is an iterative game, and spreading fake news or low-quality content undermines one's credibility. So instead, I argue that the goal of InfoOps is to paralyze foreign leaders' political decision-making through two psychological biases. Confirmation bias, so how we acquire information, process it in a way that confirms our own prior beliefs, and reactance, the desire to have a freedom of behavior or to maintain it, and the resistance to pressure. So the argument then is that polarization leads to paralysis, because polarization leads to more extreme preferences that then make it harder to form a winning coalition in elections, but also in policy-making processes. How do senders of these info operations activate simultaneously both confirmation bias and reactance? They do so through strategic narratives. The use of collated series of events or events that are positioned in such a manner as to manipulate the audience in the target state to respond in exactly the manner the sender wants it to respond. Usually on controversial topics, pre-existing social cleavages. Topics like migration, poverty, inequality. So we show through our content analysis that there's a systematic overrepresentation of strategic narratives in Russian-sponsored outlets in Estonia, a small state at the Russian periphery that receives much of this content. We analyzed the content over 2 months from about 15% of all posts for Delphi, the largest information portal in the Baltic states, and the third most visited information, third most visited website. And then Sputnik S, the Estonian, now shuttered outlet of the Sputnik network. You'll note that almost half of all content for Sputnik is linked to strategic narratives, whereas less than 1 out of 6 articles that appeared or posts were linked. There is a sizable difference here. Now, 1 out of 6 is not altogether surprising because, again, this is not fake news. Instead, these are real events, real people, but that are positioned in such a way and reported in such a way as to polarize audiences. To back up the content analysis, we conducted survey experiments in 2 rounds in August 2019 and in May, June 2020, using Sputnik and Russian migration vignettes. And particularly, these are vignettes that were actually reported in real news outlets. And also ERR, so the Estonian Public Broadcasting Network. We looked at outcomes in vote choice, or who people would vote for hypothetically, but also the believability. And in the second round, we included, of course, English and Russian. The hypotheses being that state-sponsored content on migration polarizes voters on an ideological left-right axis, leading them to vote for more extreme parties. That the politics of memory over World War II polarized Estonians on the ethno-linguistic cleavage. And lastly, that the strategic narrative of poverty and income inequality polarizes on an ideological axis. To give you an example of vignette, this is a rather typical vignette on the question of World War II and the Soviet occupation. And what we found was, conversely, that the vignette of the politics of memory, as well as the vignette on migration, was quite effective in polarizing. However, what's surprising here is that not only do strategic narratives polarize on ethno-linguistic cleavages, but even non-Russian and non-ideological sources like Estonian Public Broadcasting, which has a very center mainstream focus, can polarize. And I'll get back to that later. The effectiveness of these strategic narratives in polarizing varies over time. You'll notice that in August 2019, the migration network was very powerful. However, in June and May of 2020, the migration narrative was less powerful in polarizing Estonians. And we can see the same effect where migration is less powerful a theme over the course of time. Lastly, the combination of reactance and confirmation bias contributes to the polarizing type of strategic narratives. And what we can see here is that the power of the politics of memory is quite strong, But what matters is that ethnicity determines how one positions oneself faced with these narratives. So to conclude, in this time, the dose makes the poison. Strategic narratives polarize regardless of the source, whether it's Estonian public broadcasting or Sputnik. The mechanisms, the psychological mechanisms, are confirmation bias and reactance, leading to polarization. And lastly, the efficacy of these narratives actually evolves over time. What works in 2019 might not necessarily work on the same audiences in 2020 or in 2021. With that, and pending your questions, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Foster, for your fascinating presentation. And next, we have Dr. Anahit Parzyan, the Director of Knowledge Technology and Awareness Center for Social Services. And the title of the presentation is Armenia in Cyberspace, Small Stake, Big Opportunities. Anahit, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you very much for introduction. Thank you for organizing this very interesting and important platform for discussion. And it's my pleasure to talk about the Armenian infrastructure regarding cyberspace, and especially about the policy on implementing strategy considering small states theory. So cyberspace is a man-made domain, and it is a new platform for international relations. The invention of the 20th century, the cyberspace and also the internet, is another sphere for international relations. Many international players are managing their relations not only on space, not only on usually accepted and generally known platforms, but also on cyberspace, and the regulations in this sphere are still open for discussion. New space for defensive and offensive policies for regulating and balancing those affairs is also referring to cyberspace. So defensive and offensive actions are taking place in cyberspace, and this is a reality, and this is a platform where the regulations are still to be considered. Another topic is the equal access to information for all that has started to provide information not only for goodwill, provoking also irregular warfare, because the consumption and the availability of these platforms are very cheap and accessible for all. It means that it becomes a tool not only for good usage but also for bad, actually. And digital weapons are possessed not only by major actors but also non-state actors, including terrorist networks that use these weapons to manipulate or to manage their actions in cyberspace, by that pressing this or that state for their policy implementation or for any reasons they would like to take part in. So these main issues are topics of today's discussion, and regarding this hypothesis and these problems, we would like to see whether small states manage cyberspace regulations or whether they have new opportunities in this world. In November 2011, the Department of Defense of the United States issued a report to Congress confirming that it was ready to add cyberspace to sea, land, air, and space as the latest domain of warfare. The military would, if necessary, use force to protect the nation from cyber attacks. This is one of the most powerful countries that is adopting this space as another sphere of regulating its military affairs, and is using irregular counterattacks. Even when the warfare is taken in cyberspace, it is ready to use other type of military attacks for attacking or for responding to this. This is a major change in military affairs, and of course it has its circumstances with other states that will be used as a small actors in this warfare. In July 2016, allies reaffirmed NATO's defensive mandate and recognized cyberspace as a domain of operations in which NATO must defend itself as effectively as it does in the air, on land and at sea. Regarding these two regulations, we still have to have an international means of conduct and norms of conduct to be able to equally and relatively use this military offensive and defensive sphere equally fair for other state actors. For this reason, there are different regulations, and we would like to see whether small states and big have the same opportunities in big space, or whether they have less opportunities. Do small states face a unique set of cybersecurity challenges, or similar to powerful states? In one hand, if we have the capabilities to enrich our cyberspace with high quality technology, we will be more sensitive to cyber attacks. But at the same time, if we have these powerful tools to protect ourselves, in that case, the infrastructure will have better regulations, defensive regulations. Small states are less capable of maintaining this high-quality technology, and of course their sensitiveness to cyber attacks will be higher in this case, and the regulations will be less effective for them as well. Capabilities disproportionate to the size. This sentence can be interpreted in two parts. First of all, if we measure the states with their powerful based on the territory and their natural resources, in this case, if we consider technology as another resource, if we have historical advantage like the USA, EU member states, or now a very advanced China, in that case, of course, small states will have not that much capability to have the equal capabilities to enrich their potential in future and to have the defensive mechanisms. But on the other side, technology is based on innovation, which is not very much measured by the input with relatively measurable means, but also by innovations that is progressed by technology and education and human capital. In that case, states can still have the opportunity to accelerate capabilities disproportionate of their sizes. Cyberspace provided opportunities to obtain capabilities disproportionate to its smallness, and by this regard, Estonia can be one of the states to be mentioned here. Cyberspace jeopardizes geographical limits and provides unlimited opportunities to states because it does not consider sea access or infrastructure mechanisms as a main priority as we measure the capabilities. Estonia is already named to be one of those small states that find itself as a new, disproportionate to its sizes, new potentially developed country in e-technologies, and Georgia in the Caucasus region is among the top ratings and indexes in all spheres, particularly in cybersecurity mechanisms in the Caucasus. The paradox of the vulnerability. Actually, the more advanced the cyber capabilities of the states are, the more vulnerable they become. Of course, this is true, but actually this cannot be considered to be a stopping mechanism for not developing a state, because if we consider this action, in that case, we won't have the advantage of the technologies that will bring to the general economical advantage and also defensive advantage. Now, the military interactions have moved to cyberspace. The economy is basically very much dependent on data analytics. Medicine is so closely interconnected with high advanced levels of technology. And if we consider that the less we go into cyber, the less we will be vulnerable, in that case we will also have to measure how much we will lose within this journey, and will this journey be more less advantageous than the one that we will face concerning and including the vulnerabilities in cyberspace. Small states and norms of conduct in cyberspace. Of course, if the regulations are not very much clear and on a consensus basis, the small states will have difficulties in arbitraging different situations, particularly if greater states and superpowers are included. But unfortunately, cyberspace is still a space where no common norms of conduct are equally acceptable for all states to accept. China, Russia, and the US are the biggest cyber triangle that are actually involved in regulation and norm adaptation processes, but at the same time, there have different viewpoints regarding the open and non-regulated cyberspace, which is mostly promoted by the US, and China and Russia are more concerned with the sovereignty of the space of the states and are pushing for the second type of the cyber regulations. On this regard, we don't have a common cyberspace regulation, which is very much unproductive for, especially for small states. Securing the space, cyberspace of Armenia. In this part of my presentation, I would like to mostly focus on Armenia. Cybersecurity challenges of Armenia are absolutely on a very high priority level discussed. The cybersecurity field in Armenia is still in the early development stages and requires both conceptualization and definition of the main components and tasks to address them. There are different documents now circulating. In some documents, cyberspace is mostly referring to information security, while in other places it is focusing cybersecurity as a space that is very much connected with the technology. And I think that in this case, there should be a kind of consensus on whether we understand cybersecurity that also includes information security, or whether we still differentiate between these two parts. And regarding that part, after the definition, we will still need to be focused on each of these components and still find the consensus on naming the main components and tasks to address them. Cybersecurity challenges of Armenia are on a regional and global level, of course, because on a regional and global, the cybersecurity index of Armenia has a dramatically low rate that overall decreases the status of digital deployment development index of Armenia, both globally and regionally. There are objective and subjective reasons for that. Objective is that because of the lack of the cybersecurity strategy on a national level, it's hard to name and address the components and to have the dynamic index upgraded, but at the same time there are objective reasons because of the different types of regulations and at the same time different type of ministerial organizational infrastructure in processes. It was hard to focus on specific type of strategy, and partially it was addressed in national security strategy, partially it was in the digital transformation strategy, but still a focus on cybersecurity is still missing. No specified legislation for cybersecurity operates nationwide, which is absolutely makes it difficult to focus on challenges, and no specified unit or standardized measurements or methodology framework regulates cybersecurity policy. The second component is absolutely the absence of the second component is very much connected to the first one. I think that if there is the specific legislation, afterwards we will have this. In 2017 to 2018, there was a specified unit. It was called Digital Armenia Foundation, which was mainly focusing on digital transformation, one of the biggest components of which was cybersecurity. But still, the foundation was closed later on, and currently cybersecurity issues are under the Ministry of High Tech and are in the process of development, and in the coming future it will be more clear on which parts should be, the nation should be focused. Cyberspace and critical infrastructure of Armenia. Of course, critical infrastructure is basically the major component to be addressed on a governmental level for cyberspace, and particularly to define which are cyber-sensitive critical infrastructures, because most of the critical infrastructures are maintained by private sector, and it is of highest priority to see whether their protection mechanisms and cybersecurity mechanisms are those that are going smoothly in line with the cybersecurity standards. Promote legislation to adopt and declare critical infrastructures that are cyber sensitive, and after the legislation and the adoption of the legislation, it will be easy in case of attack, especially by our counterparts. It will be easy to ask for international arbitrage and also for international forensic examination to particularly focus on understanding the reasons, the risks, and the mechanisms. Promote measurements and standards to private sectors and public sectors for critical infrastructures is also greatly important, because currently each of the private sector that operates critical infrastructure are based on their particular measurements of cybersecurity, and it will be interesting and important to have a united view on that. Supervise, evaluate security and resilience of critical information, promoting safety and security, and also to maintain a methodological procedures and processes to help critical infrastructure entities and operators to first of all identify which are the critical infrastructures that are cyber sensitive, and later on to manage cyber risks that may occur within these infrastructures. Usually in many countries the critical infrastructures are basically those that are the main components which the operation of the country is based on: chemical infrastructure, commercial facilities, communication, manufacturing, financial services, and whatever, information technology and other infrastructures. But each country is actually focusing and naming the critical infrastructures for their states themselves. So still we have to define which are the critical infrastructures for Armenia. The mechanisms of the critical protection of critical infrastructure, the cyber attacks, are to be done with the following main, very much internationally adopted mechanisms. First of all,
Dr. Parzyan, could I please ask you to wrap up your presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. And these procedures are very useful, and of course they are important components of each of it: identify, protection, detection, respond, and recovery. Of course, the critical infrastructure should be a trusted infrastructure, and of course they should be drill exercises to usually see their capabilities and to share information about them, and to on a governmental level to protect the protection for the country. Armenia can accelerate from a small state theory, can accelerate disproportionate cyber power to secure the nation based on cybersecurity protection and on technology development. Armenia can become a norm entrepreneur if it adopts its personal cybersecurity norms and being involved in international norm regulations, particularly to cyber. Armenia can be actively involved in cyber diplomacy by this entrepreneurship mechanism, and for that reason, Armenia should maintain several very important tasks to be proceeded. For national, or for having a shared peaceful cyber environment, or on a national level, on a regional level, and of course on an international level. Thank you for your time and for your attention. If there will be any questions, I will be very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parzyan. Ladies and gentlemen, with the presentations by Ms. Sylvie Lembe, Dr. Foster, as well as Dr. Parzyan, we have a conclusion for this session. We have time for questions from the audience, so let me know if you have any questions or remarks concerning the presentations. Yes, we have a question. The gentleman.
Yes, I can raise my voice, it's okay. My question is to Dr. Parzyan. So, my name is Sarkis Karagüz,
Parzyan. So the question is, regardless the results of the war, last conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, do you think technology had a great influence and impact in defining who is the winner or the loser?
Dr. Parzyan.
The methods and also the results of the war, and this technology is very much having an influence on the final results of the war. I think that we have to consider this in obtaining technology that will actually have being a defensive in its nature, and also have very much more dynamic and very active regulations regarding the cyberspace. We have to enrich our capabilities very fast in cyberspace, and we have to see these procedures in future, that will be in future. Everything is going to be in cyberspace, and we should be ready for that.
Thank you very much for your question and answer, Dr. Parzyan. Any additional questions? So, ladies and gentlemen, unless we have any additional questions from the virtual audience, which I cannot see unfortunately, I would like to end this session. Thank very much indeed all our presenters for their fascinating presentations, and invite you all to take another break. We will convene immediately in the scheduled time after the short coffee break. Thank you.